In this episode, we will explore whether the Buddha's teaching is a science or a remedy or the prescription to cure the lifelong disease of suffering. Before we go into that, I would like to bring up a statement from Ajahn Brahm, who actually has a degree in theoretical physics from Cambridge University. After he got his degree and he left after teaching a little bit, I think about a couple of years, he left London and went to Thailand. And from there, he ordained as a monk and spent a lot of time in austerity and practiced Buddha's teaching. And finally, he mentioned that he took the challenge to see whether Buddha's theory is one that really we can observe and accept it as a fact. And he concluded that Buddha's theory is a fact and nobody else would be able to break this theory. That is a very profound statement from Ajahn Brahm, who has been an abbot for Buddhist monastery in Western Australia in Perth. And he has been echoing Buddha's teaching for last 40 or last 3 decades, I think. So with that, I wanted to bring my own experience and discuss a little bit more on this aspect and give some perspective for you to think about or contemplate and get some benefit from this discussion. When you practice Buddha's teaching, you will experience the true nature of this world and go beyond this existence. One of the intriguing questions asked from me most of the time is that why Buddha's teaching is full of those numbering or numbering system. What that means is actually they are curious about why he has Four Noble Truth, Eightfold Path, Four Foundation of Mindfulness, 10 Fetters, and so forth. And it's very good questions. And then I contemplate on this, and then of course I got two answers for that. One is of course that generally people think that really during Buddha's time or about 2,600 years ago, there wasn't a very prominent written text at that time, but people need to memorize whatever is being said, and because of that, they have put us different kind of a methodology with the numbering process. So when you have numbers, it's easy to remember. Or there is three things, and there is four things, and there's eight things like that. So I think that is one of the reason, but I do see that it is much more deeper reason for this, because Buddha's teaching is a little bit more than science. And then if you have followed my previous episodes, I was giving that emphasis of word dukkha that Buddha mentioned is actually a dis-ease that every human being is going through. And Alan Watts mentioned that as combined word of disease. In fact, actually, we are suffering from a disease. At the end of this disease, it's a fatal in the sense, of course, you will die on one day. So that was one of the reasons even Siddhartha decided to find a cure for this. And in fact, actually, he found that cure. And then he prescribed that remedy to people. When he is prescribing this remedy, he has to prescribe it in a specific way depending on the temperament of the person who's listening. So that is why there are so many sutra. But the real word sutra, or if you translate that word sutra from Pali or even the Sanskrit to English, it is a formula or a prescription. That is five different numbers in his prescription. When he prescribed this to people with different temperament, that prescription may have different numbers, Four Noble Truth or Eightfold Path or 10 fetters or so and so forth. And why we need this prescription? We need this prescription because of that fatal disease that we human are going through throughout their life. That is how it's been seen. So, as I mentioned earlier, even Alan Watts was talking about that this is a disease, and so the his core teaching of Four Noble Truth, where that really first noble truth is to diagnose is or identify that we do have this disease in our life, which is fatal, and then the second noble truth is that really the finding the cause for this disease or the root cause for this disease, which is actually shows that as thirst or the tanha. Because of that, we have this disease throughout our life. And then we need to find whether we can cure this. That part comes with the third noble truth. Buddha mentioned that, of course, it can be cured. And then he has gone through that process and then he cured himself. So, with that, he gave the actual precise prescription on how to cure this disease, which is the fourth noble truth, eightfold path. So that is how most of the scholars identify Buddha and Buddha as a doctor rather than a teacher. While I totally agree with that kind of analysis, I could see the scientific aspect of his teaching as well. Now, with my own experience, if I go back to that Four Noble Truth, I could see that first noble truth, where you identify that there is a disease or the actually dukkha, is like switching on your existence, just like a light bulb. Once you switched on, you are in that suffering mode. So this is the first noble truth, but in binary form, just like one and zero. So one is being that in this existence, going along with suffering and prolonging that every birth after birth. But once you really identified that in total, and then if you recognize it completely, you can just switch it off that, and then you can go back to that zero level where you don't have that existence anymore. So it is the once you get that kind of a recognition within you, you already knows the second noble truth and the third noble truth as Buddha has seen it. With that kind of a experiential insight, you will sink into this eightfold path as the noble person, and it will actually cure your disease permanently. So, this kind of aspect I have already discussed in my previous episodes, where that really you would let go of those seven fetters which are remaining after you have seen the first noble truth or after you have experienced the first noble truth. So, but I wanted to bring the scientific aspect of this Buddha's teaching, where now he mentions about this dependent origination, where the science behind it, because he mentioned about the whole existence depending, or it's kind of a cycle of dependence origination, where that really you do have that ignorance. I'll first state the Pali version of it. That is that Buddha mentioned it as avijja pachya sankara, sankara pachya vijnana, vijnana pachya namarupa, namarupa pachya salayatana, salayatana pachya passa pacchaya vedana, vedana pacchaya tanha, tanha pacchaya upadana, upadana pacchaya bhava, bhava pacchaya jati, jara, marana, dukkha domanassa. So it's a long phrase, but it is been categorized for 12 steps or the 12 links which depend on the very first cause, which is that ignorance or the avidya. So in English translation, of course, that is which is the ignorance. In fact, it is the ignorance of that our thirst or our clinging nature. So with that ignorance, what will happen is actually mental formation, and then with the mental formation, we have that vijnana or the consciousness, normally known referred to as, and with that, of course, we do have the name and form. That's how we refer to that as nama rupa. And then, of course, after that, the salayatana, which is actually the six senses. And then after that, spasso, in the sense that like the contact, the sensation of connection with everything, and the feelings, which is actually passa vedana. And then after that, the tanha, which is actually your thirst to continue, and then the upadana, which is with that starting the process of becoming, and then of course the next link is the becoming or the bhava, and then because of that bhava we have this birth and old age and death and all that. That is actually in Pali it says jati jara marana dukkha domanas, in the sense that really including with that you get sorrows, and then of course the dukkha itself, the whole existence or the changing nature. So that is the whole science behind this existence. So it's like a dependent origination, and then it's kind of a cycle. So if I equate that to like atom, and then we realize that okay, atom is has a cork, and then of course the proton, electrons, and all that things. So similarly, the what Buddha mentioned was that really the when you have the binary of one and zero, the one is comprised of this dependent origination process. So because of that process, which is the changing nature as well, we actually suffer, or we have this kind of a dis-ease, because we just connected with so many things and we clinging to things, and then with that clinging we have that friction as well. So all these two aspect is being described in this dependent origination, how it's arising and how it's really running throughout our life, and then even life after the other life, and all that is continuation. So that is how I see this Buddha's teaching on as a science. And this particular dependent origination will be visible to you once you really get into that level of experiential insight into the first noble truth, or the how this disease or how this dukkha is really running through. So it is like you are stepping aside of this existence, and then actually watching it or actually experiencing it beyond that. So Buddha has given a good kind of analogy for this. It's kind I have brought this before as well, because most of the time that when you are in the this process, you are ignorance by itself. Because of that, you cannot see it properly. It's just like the tadpole swimming in the water and trying to find the actual water. What is the water? Because you are inside this process, so you cannot really see this properly, comprehend this properly. But once this tadpole transformed into a frog, So who actually jump out of water and land on the dry land and watching the water flowing underneath him. So once you got that experiential insight to first noble truth, you will be like that. You will be watching the dependent origination is flowing through you, where that you could be away from that and distance from it and live peacefully without clinging into any of those incidents happening around you, and do not have that friction as well, because once you cling into something you may have a friction to other things. So that is the cause of this whole suffering or the dis-ease. So what Buddha mentioned was that really, of course, the science behind it. So I could see Buddha's teaching is science as well, and of course he has given the remedy for this disease too. So answer the question of whether Buddha is a scientist or a doctor, I would say both.